For Mosaic Miami, Can We Talk, Can We Really Talk? You know, this year we're going to talk about reflections of Juneteenth, diversity in Miami, and the art world. We are grateful for Franklin Simmons and his team at PAM for hosting this wonderful event and for partnering with us as we celebrate Juneteenth. Since we all gathered last Juneteenth, MCCJ has some exciting changes. We have rebranded our brand and we are now called Mosaic Miami. As most of you have known us with MCCJ, it's been a 88-year organization that's done some impactful things in our community, and we hope and pray to continue to do the same. We are wholeheartedly believe in the name Mosaic Miami because it captures that defining characteristics of a unique community while capsulating our mission and respecting our 88-year legacy. For Mosaic Miami, a social impact organization that is dedicated to curating opportunities to bring our community together and find common ground, Juneteenth is a day to reflect and active dialogue and lock arms as a community to forge a way for a brighter future. We must try to encourage collective growth by getting together with comfortable and uncomfortable conversations. Historically designated as Juneteenth, June 19th, Juneteenth is a day for all of us to celebrate. This afternoon's conversation between PAM's director, Franklin Simmons, and Mosaic Miami's executive director, Matthew Anderson, presents us with an opportunity to look through the lenses of the art world and the Miami community to discuss the story of Juneteenth. Thank you so much for your time and patience, and we look forward to hearing this wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Alex. I want to start today off in a special way, in a way of song. This is a celebration, a day of remembrance and a lot of thought. So I'm going to start like this. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. And our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. What a powerful song. I've heard this song over and over again. Please be seated. My whole entire life. But this year, it hits a little different. Our country is in a crisis right now. Our country is more divided now than ever. But looking out this beautiful mosaic of Miami's diversity, it gives me hope. Because I see a crowd of people that could be anywhere on Friday at noon. But you're here in the spirit of Juneteenth. And it gives me hope that we can one day march on. We're marching on. And one day, hopefully, victory will be won. Thank you so much for joining us here at PAM, Miami's flagship art museum. Thank you so much to Franklin and his team, alongside my Mosaic Miami Board of Directors and my team, Moni Barrios and Ruby Elias, for making today possible. Today, we're going to focus on bulldozing barriers, and we're going to reflect on Juneteenth, diversity in Miami, and the art world. On Monday, we're all going to have the opportunity to reflect on Juneteenth and to celebrate. 188 years ago, Union soldiers marched into Texas with the good news that slavery is over as was the Civil War. 250,000 slaves were set free in Galveston, Texas. Well, let's think about this. That's 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So between the Emancipation Proclamation, approximately 5 million slaves were freed prior to 250,000 in Galveston. So you have 250,000 people knowing that in another part in the U.S. that there are other free slaves. The amount of perseverance and hope and faith that those 250,000 individuals had was extraordinary. The Juneteenth story gives us the power to reflect, to learn, to go outside our comfort zone, to grow, to connect as human beings, and of course, keep the faith. The art world and art gives us the opportunity to do the same, but under very specific conditions. Number one, the art has to have a right home. Art needs to have the right keeper. Art needs the right storyteller. And art needs the right advocate that's intentional about bringing different kinds of art from different types of people that reflects the community where that art lives. My friend, Franklin Sermons, is a master at that. Franklin really understands the importance of where a community, a collection, and programming intersect. Over the last 8 years, Miami has been lucky to have Franklin at the helm of the Perez Art Museum. In order to set the tone for today's conversation, I want to read a quote from Dennis Scholl, who is a community pillar and legend in the art world. And Dennis led the search, which, thank God, brought Franklin to Miami. And when Franklin came, Dennis said the following: We couldn't be more excited to have Franklin at Pam's helm. He brings with him experience at numerous large institutions and has a proven track record for galvanizing communities. All of that makes him an ideal person to lead the key museum in a city now renowned as an arts destination and home to a vibrant mix of cultures and traditions. Before arriving at LACMA in 2010, Mr. Sermons was a curator of modern and contemporary art at the Minot Collection in Houston. Before that, he worked as an independent curator, co-curating shows such as Basquiat at the Brooklyn Museum and One Planet Under a Groove, hip-hop and contemporary art at the Bronx Museum of Art. He also served as a curator of the Prospect Biennial in New Orleans in 2014. For his part, Mr. Sermons is no less bullish on Miami than Perez. It's really fascinating how Miami has become not only an international center for commerce, but an international center for ideas, he said. In terms of talking about the art of our time, from the 20th to 21st centuries, Pam is going to be the focal point for that conversation. A lot has happened since 2015, Franklin. And we can no longer say Pam is going to be the focal point for conversation. Pam is the focal point for conversation and action. Franklin is somebody that I look up to, and it's my distinct honor to have this fireside conversation with Franklin. I'm excited to dig into this conversation. I promise we'll have some time for a Q&A, and let's roll. Let's put our hands together for Franklin.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for being here. As Matt said, it's, you could be a lot of different places, but you choose to be here in this moment. So thank you for that. And thank you for all that you do, for providing this platform, for keeping the faith, as we said, and for leading a conversation that so sorely needs to be held right now. Thanks for everything you do, Matt. Really appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me. I know we've talked about some of these things here and there, but to be able to engage with you is an honor.
Likewise. So let's dig in. So Franklin, as we're on the eve of Juneteenth,
Speak up, Nat.
As we're on the eve of, thanks, Nat. As we're on the eve of Juneteenth, what does Juneteenth mean to you?
Well, first off, let me say also, Matt asked me to do this, obviously, right? So I'm automatically going to say yes out of our past relationship and respect for all that you do. And then when you say that it's around Juneteenth, I think what it is, obviously, with your emphasis on bulldozing barriers, is that it's a chance to probably confront a dialogue that we don't often get to have. And so I think that's what Juneteenth means to me. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I waver, right? I was in Houston 2 weeks ago, and it's weird, like, you feel Juneteenth in Houston. Like, you feel it everywhere. We were going, not only because we were going by Emancipation Park, but it's a different demographic, it's a different layout. The intensity of the history that Juneteenth represents is more palpable there than it is here. So I'm in that mode. I'm also in another weird mode when I think about Juneteenth right now, because this Juneteenth also means, and I know we did a lot of maneuvering around dates, but Juneteenth has become something else, right? So we're here convening on a Wednesday. You probably have an event on Friday. I have one on Monday. So it's becoming something broader in the fabric of society, and I'm excited about that part. So I guess what it means is something that is personal on one hand, which is that it means getting together with friends and family and probably having something really good to eat. And then on the other hand, it's a more generalized recognition of where we come from that I think, obviously, as you say, we need. We all need. So that, I don't know, that's where that's what Juneteenth makes me think about today. Your rendition of Lift Every Voice was amazingly powerful.
Yes,
and
it was
that's
great.
something that also comes to mind. And I don't think in my 8 years here we have ever had Lift Every Voice sung in this building, so I am just absolutely delighted. So thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
So I want to take the conversation personal. But since we touched on your feelings on Juneteenth, we're in a weird climate right now. And in addition to all the diversity, the divisiveness, there's also an element of censorship of our history. And art can be used as a vehicle to tell history. So in your mind, how can we pivot, in this instance, in this climate, to use art as a way to make sure that truth continues to be told in the right way, and use this building as a safe place to do so?
Okay, thank you for that. I like to feel that we all move about our lives with a degree of intention that allows for us to be prophetic in some way, right? And so I'm going to give you an example. So about 4 years ago, probably with some incentives, we decided that we wanted to present, explore, and discuss what a history of interactive art might be like in museums. Now, how many of you have heard of Super Blue? Right, so we have this thing called Super Blue, which started by one of the world's biggest art galleries called Pace. And it's all centered around what are supposed to be interactive experiences with art. One of those artists who you may know of is James Turrell, who has famously been the incentive for a Drake video, right? Or Apple, the way that the Apple ads use color chromatic backgrounds comes straight from James Turrell. There are other wonderful things in there that are quite tricky, and some are a little bit overly gadget-like. Nonetheless, it's about this experience that is 360, your body is moving through space. It's not the traditional, let me go look at a painting at 56 inches, right? It's about something different. And so I was so interested in the phenomenon of that, and I was interested in the way that so many people were speaking about it as if it were brand new, right? And this is where I think in terms of Juneteenth, we can't forget history. We can't forget that there's a foundation to things. And so when I say, okay, why does everybody look at this as brand new? So that led us to bring in a piece from 1962 called Silver Clouds by the artist Andy Warhol. 1962, right? It was a pretty analog moment. There's no digital, we're not talking about that. And yet, he was creating this atmospheric installation, which was essentially helium-filled silver balloons, and you have fun with them. You go like this, and you bat them around, and they touch you, and it's kind of cool. Likewise, we know that there is a deep, deep history of Latin American art that is about this same degree of interactivity. So when you come to PAM, oftentimes you come up the steps and you might be tempted to run through a thing of blue strings that looks like spaghetti, right? And that's the artist Jesus Rafael Soto, originally from Venezuela. And so that piece is, the original date of that piece I think is like 1965. So there's a history here that we forget, and we want to, like, our job is, I think, sometimes to resuscitate history, or to at least remind people that there is a history and that not everything is brand new, and I think there's a reason for that, right? It helps us do things better in the present, or do things better in the future. So then we took it even further, and we decided that we were going to work with the Argentine artist Leandro Ehrlich. And I'm saying this as if it all happened in a sequence. Of course it didn't, but that's where it goes back to, we walk through life with some degree of intentionality each and every day with every single choice that we make. And so it just happens that we found ourselves this past summer with 4 major installations. The other one I'm not mentioning is Carlos Cruz Diaz, artist who created what is called a chromosaturation room, right? 3 rooms of color that you move about in, really beautiful. It prompted our marketing team to go in there and make their own little Drake video, which plays really well on Instagram. And so this is another piece that has a prior date that is in the late 60s. So these things are happening, they're happening, and there's something for us to think about differently. And so that's kind of how I think that intentionality brings us to that point. Now, it just so happens that this past year, or this past couple of months, we've had a degree of legislation that is changing what is allowed to be taught in the public schools, right? And we know, for the sake of Juneteenth, let's say very clearly that the history of black people in this country is being not only contested, but actually being erased, right? Clearly. And it just so happens, and this goes to your question about what we can do, is that our intentionality put us in a position where our former chief curator, Renee Morales, just opened an exhibition in Chicago last week on the artist Gary Simmons. Gary Simmons' exhibition will come here to PAM in December of this year. Gary's early work, and this is an artist who was born in 1964, his early work centers on American stereotypes, particularly stereotypes that pertain to black history, to black culture. And so we are very, very, very squarely going to be dealing with all of the images in history that are being sought to be removed from the Miami or Florida education system. It's straight up. Now I'm having meetings, and I'm so grateful for this moment to be able to speak about this publicly, because we haven't had that chance yet. We're just in preparation. We're actually preparing ourselves. We're preparing our security, our visitor services assistants, anybody who walks in this building. We want them to be prepared for certain images that people have found to be challenging, or in some cases, found them worthy of removal. So I'm speaking very specifically about images of the Ku Klux Klan. I'm speaking very specifically about books that have been banned. In fact, Gary has created a library that is essentially of the books that are being banned. So that's where we are. We're in a position as a museum to use art as a catalyst for difficult conversations, as we like to say.
So as you take this, as you lead this courageous initiative,
But it wasn't courageous, right? Because we were just leading with just our daily intention.
I'm with you. But that goes to show how important coalition building is. We're all in this together. So how can the community help you in that effort to stand our ground?
Well, I don't know. I think for us as a museum, what we do try to do here, and we're part of a constellation, right? We have the BAS, we have the ICA, we have other institutions that are part of a constellation, a group of museums and cultural institutions. We also work closely with New World and ARSH, etc. But what we're trying to do on the level of visual art is, in fact, be Miami's museum. Be a place where everybody feels welcome, be a place where everybody feels like, oh, I saw something of myself, be a place where one could be provoked by ideas to perhaps live a little bit differently, or at least just make a different move one day. So we constantly are seeking to do that, and we do that with exhibitions, we do that with our permanent collection, we do that with our educational programs. And so essentially all I'm saying, and all I'm pitching with your wonderful question, is be involved. And that could very simply be participating in a membership program, or literally sitting out at Verde and not leaving before taking a look at the art. It's really that simple. We really feel like we are here for everyone. We have done about, on average, 250,000 a year, even with COVID. Our building could stand a little bit more, and so we're trying to do that in different ways. But yeah, art should be a part of everyone's life in some way, and I think that happens in different ways. And I don't think that the museum is necessarily privileging one art over another. Yeah, we're good at certain things, and when we're not good at other things, like say for instance film, then we have our collaborators, and we go to Third Horizon, or we go to Miami Film Festival. We have partners who have looked at what I think is one of our sweet spots, the Caribbean, who have been doing it for a long time and know certain things that we don't know. And so we collaborate, we work together. We provide a platform for that type of collaboration. I mean, like being here with you today.
Absolutely. Collaboration is key. And you've been so intentional of making sure that Pam's collection represents Miami's community, and that when people see the art here, they can see themselves in the art. Your Art and Soul initiative is my favorite event in the year. You see across, you see an intersection of all of Miami, from races, socioeconomic, sexual orientation, everything, the whole nine. It's incredible. Everybody feels like there's something for everyone that night. Can you talk about some of the innovative ways you've gone about building the collection so it's reflective, such as your African American Fund?
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, there's a foundation to everything. There's a history to everything. There's something to take from a given history that leads us in the right direction. So when we began as a museum in January of 1984, and being in Miami and not being in the American Northeast or Midwest or someplace that was attached to the kind of collecting habits that we would define as being European in foundation. We didn't have tons of collectors who were saying, okay, I'm giving you 100 works of art. Here, this is for your museum. It wasn't like that. It's a different situation. And so what I believe our founding director picked up on was that you don't need that. What is a masterpiece? What is a blockbuster? There are many different ways in which to define those things. And so the first thing he did, 6 months before the museum opened, was a project with two artists. Birthday was yesterday. Christo and Jean-Claude, a couple who lived and worked together, had the same birthday, and made crazy artworks, right? Crazy, crazy, crazy. And one of those crazy things was to surround 11 of the islands in Biscayne Bay with some pink fabric. It sounds silly in retrospect, but the images that were created from this project that only lasted 2 weeks are incredible. And they're just beautiful to look at, and we need beauty in our life. But even deeper than that, it brought 4,000 Miamians together who didn't necessarily know each other, like each other, in order to create this work. It had to be material sewn, and the material had to be brought into the water together with people and surrounded the island. It involved our elected officials had to sign off on the project. It was about community, essentially. And so we tried to use that as a foundation. We didn't become a collecting institution until 10 years later, in the mid-90s, and just to give a sense of what that means. So you can imagine, say, a museum in New York or Philadelphia beginning in the Civil War time, right? And so you would imagine what they might show, right? Predominantly, it's going to be work predominantly produced by one group of people, let's say. So for us, that meant in the mid-1990s, it meant a time when the buzzwords were globalism, multiculturalism, identity, all these things. Like if you look at articles from that moment, that's the moment that we were founded. And so our relationship to presenting those things is part of our founding. And then moving into this building just 10 years ago, we'll be celebrating the 10th anniversary this year. You also had a group of folks that were around the table, because it's Miami. I like to think because it's Miami. You had a group of folks that are around the table who are pretty much as diverse as this room is right now. And so they said, okay, we have a lot of this work that you can find in other museums, but what makes us different? Somebody started a fund for black art. Not somebody, but George Perez and Alberto Barwin at the Knight Foundation said, let's put up $1 million and buy black art, because there might not be as much of that in the collection. We want that to be represented. And so we did that. In the meantime, what we've been able to do is jump off of these histories, and I think give them, a little bit more robust energy with people like yourself. And so we took that $1 million, we spent it down to like 300,000, and we said, let's stop. And we stopped, and we decided we would make it an endowed fund, and that's where Art and Soul begins to play a bigger role. So that endowed fund is now 10% of our overall budget. Or not budget, but overall endowment. And the overall endowment is like 33, 34. So you're talking about what, $3.4 million in a short period of time, generated solely from a passion for black artists. Likewise, we started a Latin American and Latinx art fund. And frankly, when I got here, I was shocked that we didn't have one. But you shouldn't be shocked, right? Why do we need that? Why do we have to call it that? Why can't we just be that? We're Miami. It's natural. 66% Hispanic. 3/4 of us probably weren't born here. So it's just natural that way. And so we tried to jump into those areas really, really hard. And I think that's where people have found a degree of passion and a way of supporting the museum, because the museum is only supporting what they already feel passionate about.
So you were speaking as a recovering banker, you're speaking to my soul with numbers. So I understand. So when you first joined PAM, and you looked around, the art world is a competitive place for anyone. But when you look around, you see the number of black leaders in leading arts institutions. The numbers were low. I believe when you first started at PAM, there was a study by the Mellon Foundation that said about 4% of art leaders were black. I think the numbers have gone up slightly since then, not much, but slightly. If you think about the story of Juneteenth, where you have 250,000 slaves that didn't know that slavery, that freedom was possible, eventually got freed. You have people that don't think that they could sit in your shoes one day.
So again, providing what will be the next generation of thought leaders in that space. And that one is funded by the Mellon Foundation.
Awesome. So one thing that you and I have in common is that our parents from a very young age included us in the collecting process. And that gave us the ability to think outside the box and develop a love for art. And can you talk about that experience in your upbringing, and then when you had your aha moment that this is what you wanted to do, and were able to blaze your trail?
I'd love that we share that. Yeah, for me personally, I mean, in retrospect, it's almost ridiculous. I mean, my father collected, and I wanted to be playing soccer or tennis. It had nothing to do with that at all. But it rubbed off, and got to spend a lot of time around visual artists, some of whom are in our collection, and didn't think much of it. You know, it was just part of growing up. But then I think, this is so cliche at this point, but in February of 1985, my birthday's in February, there was a New York Times magazine, and that would come to the, you know, just pre-internet obviously, so like the paper was important. And it would come every Sunday, and so on the cover of this Sunday of the New York Times magazine was this guy, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and he was sitting on the cover of the magazine with a paintbrush, and he looked so cool. And it was just like, this is, whoa, this is not the experience I'm having with the artist that I know. Like, this is way different. And essentially what you could see, or what I think I saw but didn't understand, was that this was somebody who was synthesizing the language of hip-hop with visual art. And doing that not only in what we would term graffiti, writing, illustrious writing, let's say, but doing it also with music and sound, and so it was the synthesis of everything. Everything that you could possibly imagine as being important to somebody who is, 14 years old at that time? That was pretty much it. And so I studied his work and did my thesis on him years later, and continued to, I don't know, be invigorated by that story or interested in that story. But that's essentially the core part of how it happened.
The other awesome part of that process that I would love for you to share is how you were able to be exposed to artists like Ramir Bearden, etc.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but that was the part where it was like, oh, whatever. Like literally, yeah. Romare Bearden was there. There's a guy named Ed Clark. We have a beautiful painting in our collection. I was his studio assistant when I was in high school, and you know, so that meant picking up receipts off of the floor and trying to put them somewhere. They were useful. But those kind of experiences, and the idea that it's just a part of growing up, is what I think is the most, important part about it, is that it wasn't something unattainable. And I also recognize how fortunate in retrospect I was in that regard. But it was just normal, It was just there. And I think that was the most important lesson to be learned, is that art is a part of our lives the same way that, my father was a doctor. It's important for community. Like, somebody's got to tell the stories visually, in addition to all of the vocational needs that we need as a community. And I think that experience definitely has played a part in how I talk about art and have it reflected in life, or at least try to. My 13-year-old daughter doesn't seem to interested, but I guess I wasn't at that point either.
So, as we look at where we're at right now, you're clearly doing a lot. But we collectively can do more. What would you think needs to be done in order for us to push the envelope so that one day victory can be won?
In what regard? You mean in a big picture sense?
Well, for example, prior to 2020,
Yeah.
you were already making sure that this collection reflected this community. This was a safe place to convene courageous discussions.
Yeah.
But you have other institutions that were checking the box. They were just putting statements and wanting to pat on the back. That doesn't work here in Miami. But what can we do past that?
You know, we have the opportunity, we have the chance, and I don't know, I'm a little bit like, I mean, the last couple of years have been hard, let's be honest. Really hard. Like, I had to look back because we were having this conversation. And I think it was April 20 of 2020, you know, post-COVID, Dennis actually had written something in the Herald about the importance of arts right now. And right before that, there was an article about how the arts in Miami were getting beat up because COVID, so nobody can come. I mean, literally, we had to do layoffs and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote this article in the editorial section, you know, about the opportunity of what Miami represents in terms of its diversity of people, of experiences, of thought, and the way that it has people who are coming from so many different places. So we should be thought leaders in terms of the future and how we treat each other in the future. And so in the last 2 years, as you have hinted, I don't know if we've been exemplary in the way that we go about our quest for a greater degree of humanist thought in the way that we live our lives, the way that we take care of each other, the way that we look out for each other. So I think it's a challenging moment, and maybe that's the only place where real progress happens, is when we are really challenged. And so we're being challenged. And I think that that's an opportunity for us to double down on the things that we like to talk about, right? Because the selling point is, yeah, come to Miami, it's diverse, it's this, that, and the other. And so if we really believe that, then we have to be more exemplary about being open to other people. And I don't think it begins with banning books, but that's just my opinion.
So I think you were reading my mind, so I'm happy, because you were taking it right where I wanted to go for my final question before we open for Q&A. So, come to Miami. Miami is on the world's radar more than ever right now. We have a great migration to our city, a tremendous amount of wealth that's coming to our city that's driving up the prices of everything. But you also have a subset of people that bring a great amount of resources and brain power to the table. Again, Art and Soul is an example. You see folks from all over the country that love Miami and love you. How do we go about tapping into their resources, showing them they have a home here, and get them to understand our issues and utilize them to come up with solutions?
By doing exactly what you're doing, by convening people in situations not unlike this. I think it's also, you know, there are only but so many places for us to all come together from varied walks, and so, you know, we talk about stadiums as being one of those places sometimes, right? Like, it's pretty hard to find somebody in Miami who didn't want the Heat to win, right? So if we can find places where we collectively agree that we're all in it together, then we can do better. And I think that's what Mosaic Miami is all about. So we need more of that.
Amen.
We need way more of that.
Absolutely. So, guys, I'd like to open up for Q&A. When you ask your question, please state your name and the organization which you represent.
And stand so we can all hear. It's very powerful. It's a metal box that when you walk through it's in Montgomery, Alabama,
Yeah.
and it's like a
Yeah.
maze, right? And you
Yeah.
walk down and you see a representation of what happened in those
Yeah.
counties, and it just seems like that might be an opportunity to really highlight, what the history is.
Yes, thank you. I have not been. It's powerful. I've seen it and talked about it through the eyes of many. I mean, I gotta mentally prepare to go there.
Yeah.
Like it's enough just, like my family's from Georgia border, like the Georgia-Florida border. And I drove my daughter, during COVID, I drove my daughter through there. And like you still see all the cotton around and whatnot. So I gotta take it in strides. That is an incredibly powerful place. And I've actually talked about it a lot with Howard Herring at New World. Because they did a trip there with some board members, and I don't know, we haven't found the perfect way to talk about that in the context of here, but that's a powerful, powerful, powerful thing. And I think it's one of the pillars about the power of storytelling, and the power of storytelling in a museological sense, right? There's one thing to have somebody read something to you, but to have that multimedia type of experience is really powerful. We learn a lot from those types of spaces, and we're trying to learn more and take some of that to heart. It's amazing, amazing.
Tom?
I'm Reverend Tom Capo with the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Miami. Matt and I have been working on a few things. See the picture there of us. We did a unity walk through Miami last year. And I'm wondering, as we're talking about art, is there a way we can move art through Miami, mobile or some other way, that might also bring together the diverse community and represent the diversity of who we are in Miami? We're planning on this in November to do another unity walk, but it would be amazing to have some kind of physical representation of the diversity that is Miami. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but we'd love to hear it.
Couldn't agree more. The idea of collaboration, the element of collaboration that I think you're hitting on that would allow for something like that to be successful is, I'm just say, a heavy lift in some ways. So I don't have like a specific thing. All we're just trying to do is just make sure we're all at the same table and sharing those concerns. And then when it hits in some ways, Arch does a pretty big convening day that is in that spirit. I think also what we did do this year, which is in line with the concept of that, not necessarily the physicality of that, is that we were challenged this year in how we all conceive of pride, right? How do we care about each other? How can we rightly say, oh my God, there's a new law that says that drag queens are lewd, right? All this stuff is happening. These last 6 months, we've had so many conversations. I have nationally, our American Association of Museum Directors, regionally, Southeastern Art Museum Directors. Locally, we're all on a Zoom like every 2 weeks since COVID. And we're just supporting each other. And that's felt like a triumph in itself, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Just to be having that conversation together and being willing to say that we will cross-promote, we will do anything that we can to be collaborative. We need to go further, but gosh, we're being challenged, right? It's supposed to be a night to celebrate love and diversity, and y'all don't want us to do that. So we all bifurcated everything this year, right? So normally, love and humanity and community are things where you want families. But this year it was 18 and over can come for this part, 18 and under comes for this part. Ours, they had to, you know, they did it outside, no, they did it inside in the end because of the weather. And so you have to do a police sweep, right? Or at least your own security sweep. Because for us, we did 6 to 8 in the auditorium, conversations. Drag queens were part of it, but it wasn't the only thing. It was about how do you represent queerness in Miami when you're being challenged. And so we did that, right? Couldn't have a kid anywhere in sight. Green room is up here. Had to make sure that our Pantene Arts Council had to go to the Frost and convene their final meeting of the year because we didn't want them to cross each other. That's where we are right now. So we need to get somewhere else, but right now we're just trying to punch out of that little bag. And I'm so like, I think we all did pretty well because we all did what we said we were gonna do. The next path, the next generation, in a very, very methodical way. And so I think it begins with, as with everything that we try to do with the institution, it's local, but it's global, right? So Teen Arts Council, they're all coming from high schools right here, with schools all over. And they come and they go there, they tell them about the programs that are here, but they also do programs there. And so we're being fortunate. In that regard, we've been really fortunate. And the other big thing about how we reach out at the youth level in a way that is diverse socioeconomically and everything is that with our dearly departed superintendent, Dr. Carvalho, we started a thing we call Kids Pass. So every single child in Miami-Dade County Public School is entitled to free membership with, they can come here anytime with a parent or guardian. And that's across the board. So we have, that part I feel pretty good about, at least getting in there, but we gotta do more.
Hi, Tris. And I want to know, how do you all extend that career pathway for the teen council into communities where they probably would never hear something like this? Like your dad was a doctor, my dad was in the military. Their parents may not be exposed to something like this. So how do you all reach into the community and bring those underserved teens into that teen council?
Yep, that's what it's all about. Thank you for that. Chris.
My name is Chris Norwood. The historic Ward Rooming House. Josh, you did, Franklin, you're absolutely right, you did an amazing rendition of the, amazing. But it's something I've always wanted to ask you, Franklin. I think it's very relevant in this conversation. Years ago, you curated a show, I guess you must have been a very young man, you curated a show about Ralk Bunch.
Oh, wow, jeez.
And when I think about this conversation, you know, Ralph Bunche, of course, was the first black man to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Most people think that was Martin Luther King. But he had an attitude about the world that was very different. He was the, he perhaps was the first black man to cross over. That was not a celebrity, or entertainer, or sportsman of some sort. When you think of the world that he wanted to create, what was that world?
It's the world of Mosaic Miami. It's the world of, it's a world that, you know, it's the world that we aspire to. It's better than where we are, but it takes into account the aspirations that we're talking about in this room. Thank you for mentioning that. That was a really long time.
I always wanted to ask you that question.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Can you explain what that show was?
Yeah, so I think there are exhibitions where the artist trumps the subject, and then there are exhibitions where the subject trumps the artist. I probably shouldn't say that around curators, but it's true. And so the show was done at the Queens Museum of Art, where the family had spent numerous years. It also was, if you think about New York, if you know anything about New York, the Queens Museum of Art is a a little bit more nimble, a little bit more socially engaged, and part of that is because they embrace their diversity. Like, imagine to say, oh, we're more diverse than New York City, but it's true. Like, in terms of immigration, in terms of their demographics, it's unlike Brooklyn, Manhattan, whatever. And so we were trying to talk about it from that point of view. It's not unlike what we're all talking about now. And that exhibition for me was a way to use the idealism and ideals of Bunch as something to aspire to. And there happened to be several works that he was responsible for either helping get into the collection of Howard University or something like that. This was a long time ago. I forget something. But it was a way to marry those two things together. And I, it wasn't a big show, but it was, that was the idealism behind it. Likewise, next month, we're opening an exhibition on Joan Didion. And so Joan Didion's a writer. She didn't make any art, but there are like 100 artists who have made art that was somewhat inspired by Joan Didion or
book about Miami.
in that part. So the show originated in Los Angeles. It clearly goes from her beginnings in Sacramento and living in LA and living in New York. But we have this sweet spot in Miami where she spent time in 1983, right before our museum opened, and identified in many ways the framework for this institution to begin.
She didn't really have a favorable view of Miami.
I wouldn't say it was favorable,
No.
but I think, and I don't think anybody else could have written it though, and with that kind of honesty and that kind of candor, because she wasn't a part of here, and she wasn't afraid to say that, ooh, this is not working for everyone.
Right.
So that framework is a part of that exhibition. But again, it's a situation where the ideals that were written about by these two major historical figures is really the focal point of the show. And the art is not playing second fiddle, but it is in service to something else.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Chris. So, tie this all together. Juneteenth is Monday. Let this be a time to have conversations just like this with people that you don't know, to learn from their life's experiences. Take the time to read a book. Take the time to think. Time to take a breath. Because we're all in this together, and one day the victory will be won. So let's put our hands together for Franklin.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, everybody, and come back and see the galleries when you have time, or, oh, we're closed. Yes, please come back and see the galleries.